welcome back to another episode of the Q&R Code podcast. I'm Quinn, and on the other line is my twin Riley.
Hello.
Welcome back. If you are watching us on YouTube, thank you for joining us here. We are excited about the video element. You guys will have to tell us what you think. Nice things only. Right, how is your week going so far?
You know, it's going up and up because, long story short, I was having such a weird, unidentifiable pain in my right side. And when I say unidentifiable, it's because if you look up lower right quadrant pain, which doctors talk about like your abdomen in quadrants. And so I was like looking through what it could be, and there are so many possibilities. And of course, it ranges from the very mild to the very severe. But I had also been like nauseous and not well, but I knew I had been exposed to a sickness, so that kind of explained that. But then I'm like, I don't know, that's just like not fun to get another weird symptom coming up when you're going through something like that. And then, thankfully, I have a baby doctor husband that had the idea and was like,
Baby doctor is crazy.
He's not a doctor, but he hopes to be one day. It's crazy though that he's almost there, because you are an MD when you're done with med school. You have to go on and do residency to practice, but I'm like, wow, you're really just about to be a doctor.
That is crazy.
There's something called Mittelschmerz, which in German just means middle pain, I guess. And how the internet describes it is like mild cramping caused by ovulation. I'm like, okay, I think I'll decide what's mild or not. If you were actually going through, I don't know, a ruptured uterus or a broken femur, I'm like, sure, this might feel mild, but I was not just like, oh, that's a little uncomfortable. Like, I couldn't really go about my day because of it.
You might have mild schnauzers, what you said.
I think it's Mittelschmerz.
Mittelschmerz. Well, I'm so sorry to hear about your pain. That is not cool at all. And it is something that I've been thinking about, how often I don't think that at all we should be quote unquote demonizing doctors. Of course, every individual has their own. There could be certain individuals we need to critique more heavily. I don't think that the medical field in general, like doctors, I know a lot of people have this sentiment of doctors are under delivering, and I have learned so much about that from Brayden being in med school, and we have other friends in our life that are doctors and nurse practitioners, but so I think clearly it's the system. The system is under delivering in a lot of ways, more so than maybe necessarily individual doctors, because I like to believe that a lot of doctors really want to serve people and want people to get better and want to take people seriously. And this is coming to mind because I just finished through this series of podcast episodes that we had spoken about last week, that Riley and I are doing our extra deep dive for Black History Month. We, of course, think it's important to always be learning about Black history and Black experience, and that was something that was pointed out on those episodes, was how so many Black people are not taken seriously by doctors or the medical field in general, and that was something in their stories talking about people in the 1920s and how crazy it is that it is 100 years later and that still to this day the amount of Black women who go through more traumatic births and the death, what is it called, but like the maternal,
Is it like maternal mortality
Yeah,
or?
maternal mortality rate or whatever, how that is higher for black women because they just oftentimes aren't taken as seriously and their pain isn't taken as seriously and they aren't listened to. And I thought that was an interesting point that they said that some people just like discount black people and some people kind of think of them as like superhumans, as though black people just like can tolerate more pain and that that's not really as big of an issue. And yeah, so that's just all this is coming from that you said that it was described as like mild pain, which obviously pain is subjective, but I feel like as a woman who clearly is a privileged woman in my position, that doctors in a lot of ways I feel taken seriously and like highly considered, but I also have been told that I wasn't experiencing pain when I was, and that's just an interesting issue. I had an experience because of after the car accident that Riley and I were in where we were rear-ended. Riley, of course, her second time being rear-ended within a matter of months. But anyhow, when I went to the doctor slash chiropractor slash like my physical therapist and having to fill out the sheet that is this all of the scales of 1 to 10 with different pain and so like so many questions about it and you have to rate it so many times and I'm just racking my brain being like I'm not trying to lie, like I'm certainly not trying to say I'm in more pain than I am. I'm also like really focused on this pain currently and I had always felt such a serious pressure about that scale because I was like 10 must be the worst that's been experienced. I'm like in my mind being like, okay, 10 is like torture, really, really, really bad. And my doctor was like, no, 10 is the worst you've ever experienced. And I was like, oh, still that makes it hard, but why was I using like I was just thinking like it's just on the scale of bad things that have ever happened to anyone and feeling so bad and I'm like uh my whittle back pain is nothing and she's like it's what you've experienced obviously and I'm like oh yeah obviously duh
It's
makes
not
sense.
obvious, and it's also not the same across the board how it's used, so it is
Yeah,
confusing. And also, just going the whole experience of like trying to balance being like, this is a serious issue that needs to be addressed, but I feel like also as women, kind of being socialized where you're like, I don't want to be like dramatic or act like it's like a bigger deal than it is or prioritize myself in this way, like it's fine. And again, when you've also, I'm like, yeah, when I was like 12, started waking up in the middle of the night with period cramps, I would be like, oh my god, and have that be, that's really bad. It's a very different sort of bad than maybe when Quinn's knee fell off of her leg.
yeah, yeah. And different pains are just feel so differently where it's like even in my same body my level of pain I there are certain pains I can tolerate more because it happens more often to me than other pains where it's like I get screaming headaches all the time, but still a paper cut or a hangnail ripped, I'm like, ah, ow. So like,
I used to think when I grow up, like it's gonna be so sick to like not feel like paper cuts are that big of a deal because the adults around me made it seem like it wasn't, and that hasn't happened. I'm like, no, paper cuts are still just as bad. In fact,
I was braver as a kid,
yeah, I was
definitely.
gonna say, in fact, I feel like I hate it more now and try to avoid
Yeah.
the pain more.
Unfortunately, I have become less brave as I age because now I clock that like I remember when we were little and used to go to the dentist and stuff, there was one day in particular which I'm pretty, I'm about 95% sure that this is the truth, but it was either 6 or 8 teeth that in one day, one appointment, I had pulled. And that means I had the equivalent number of shots into my gums and the roof of my mouth. The roof of the mouth shots are insane. Insane. And I remember the dentists always about us were like, wow, you guys are very tough kids because we can be tough. You can be brave. We're not going to be squealing, screaming, crying in the dentist chair. They have to do their job and we need to respect that. And so I just remember being like, I am finding my state of zen and peace and toughness and bravery. And now I have just worked up more stuff in my head. But it's whatever. I'm fine. But there are some things that I'm just like, wow, I felt like a really brave little kid. And I feel like a less brave adult at times. But
It would be interesting to know if there's science behind that. If it's like now that my frontal lobe is functioning more on full throttle, I'm like, I actually know the reality of experiences, whereas as a kid, you're kind of just floating around doing things for the first time. And I don't know, I feel like I was also just less careful, and so I ended up getting hurt more. Quinn, you went and saw Companion, so now maybe we can talk about it a little bit because people have had some time to see it. We don't have to deep dive, but I'm just excited to hear what you thought.
yeah, I thought it was so good and so worthwhile. This was my second experience. Hey, there were a lot of things that were really funny. I was surprised. I didn't know it was going to be funny. It was very funny. I am really liking A24. I think they do a really good job. I am being a curmudgeon that is sick and tired of the noise in the movie theater. That I'm like, when Sean and I went and saw Baby Girl, there was a friend group sitting the row in front of us that was like making so many remarks throughout. And I think it's because it's a little bit like the sexual tension that maybe they just felt kind of awkward. So they were saying something, but there were so many like little just chirps of comments that I'm like, "Ish, keep it to yourself." Like, it's not that big of a deal, but you are taking me out of the experience by you like you're not in your living room just having this chat with your girls. Like, there's a theater full of people that are hearing you. And this did not ruin my experience whatsoever, but I just felt like saying that I was surprised that there was such, in a way it's nice to have the camaraderie of the people, but in a way I was like, you guys are cackling when this is like just such a thoughtfully put together movie, and I'm just really wanting to like watch and feel. And I don't know, I'm clearly having a curmudgeony moment and I don't know why that's feeling as sensitive, but I thought it was such a good movie and I was having so much fun, and I was being like, you guys are literally hooting and hollering.
Okay, I don't think I was being like that, but I have to say there were a few parts that I definitely was cracking up, and it wasn't just, usually in the movies something's funny and you're kind of like, haha, whatever, but there were a couple times
Okay,
where something really
so
got
maybe
me.
you're part of the problem.
I was gonna say I could have been that person, but it's not like I was like ha 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 so loud. I just was like, ha, whatever. I didn't think it
I
was
think it's one thing
obnoxious
to just be like,
laughter.
it's one thing to just laugh to yourself, and I don't mean you have to be mute, but I mean you can laugh to yourself. Whereas it was like there were several individuals that I'm like, I can hear your breath coming from inside your stomach, projecting across the theater into my eardrums when I'm trying to still pay attention. Like, and the movie is quick, so it's like now we kind of moved on. And
Yeah.
anyway, that totally is being curmudgeony, and I don't know why I'm being in that mood. But you asked what I thought about the movie, and I thought it was so good. I thought 100% that there was a very unexpected twist that I had no idea about, which I'm so glad that they didn't bring attention to that, at least that I remember in the trailer. I love that that was a twist, and that's why I'm like, I just don't even know if we need to say it because for anyone who sees it, it was so nice to not know
Mm-hmm.
like that aspect of the movie. I forget if it's Sophie or Sophia, but Sophie Thatcher is so talented and did such a good job. I loved her in Heretic, and she did so well in this as well. And I would highly recommend. I clearly have been just. It's so funny to think of now how often the podcast hears us talk about movies with how until fall of this year, you guys, I'm getting to watch my equine all run across the pasture through my window, and it's just so touching. I love it. I wish I could show you all. Um, but it's funny because I did not used to be a movie theater person, and I did not really look forward to going to the movie theater. It's not like I hated it, but I just would much prefer to watch a movie at home, which even still, if I have the choice, I would like to watch the movie at home. But there are some movies that it's like, obviously, the quality, the sound quality, the visual, that's fun. And now that something Riley and I have invested in is the passes that it's like, okay, we're paying this for the month because it's barely more expensive than buying one ticket. It's like as if you went to one and a half movies a month. That now we are just I love that you and I have dove in and we're like, yes, we are going to these movies. We are getting our money's worth and it's fun and I don't know. I am so having my day in the sun with watching all these movies and just getting to see. I think it used to feel so much more precious of like, I was very thoughtful of like which movie I would go to see in the movie theater. Yes, Companion. Yes, I want to go see The Brutalist still. Yes, I want to see Nosferatu. Yeah, I'm just like, give it to
Dogman.
me. I want to see Dogman. That looks very good too.
Um,
Honestly. And some people are
yeah.
probably like, do these girls ever watch a movie they don't like? Because I do feel like you and I are like, it was good. It was good. But I'm like, I'm having fun. And I see the good in so many like movies. I don't know. Sorry.
Also,
Go somewhere
there's
else if
just
you're looking for a critique.
are there movies that I didn't feel were 10 out of 10? 100% that I have like
Hint,
ones that I
hint,
think are
Moana 2.
yeah. Even that I'm like I'm not going to condemn that and be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that movie was trash," but it was nowhere near Moana the first at all whatsoever. I know that like so much goes in to making something and people are maybe thinking this is like participation award vibes, but I'm like if I'm the same way with rating books. Like when I'm on Fable, which is the like book tracking app I use to not be on Goodreads because Goodreads is owned by Amazon, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, and I'm not trying to give any more of my time, energy, or money to that man than necessary. And so I'm on Fable, but they like ask you for your rating every time you finish a book. And if I wasn't that hot about a book, I usually don't rate it. And that's not to say like
Yeah.
every book that I haven't rated on there I didn't like because I also just don't always feel like it. But I'm so much more prone to leave a positive review because I'm like, what's the point in tearing this down when someone else could come to this and really enjoy it and it works for them? This is just me and my opinion. And I guess by that same token, it's like, yeah, that's just your opinion. So it's okay if you leave a low review and someone
Yeah.
else will leave a positive review. I get that. But just to me, I'm like, I'll tell you if somebody asks me, "Oh, you read that? What did you think?" We can have a conversation about that.
Yeah, I can see where bad reviews have their place, of course, because me being someone looking into a restaurant, if it doesn't have glowing reviews, I would love to know that because, as you know, we hate to go to a restaurant that under delivers on food. We cannot stand that. So that's an aspect where I really love it. And clearly, there are people in the world that are going to do that. So I'm like, you guys, I don't even want to say stop doing that. I mean, if you're doing it to be a hater and it was actually good, or you're doing it out of spite, obviously that's just weird. But I think that people should feel totally empowered to say their actual opinions on that stuff. But yeah, it's the same for me when comes time to rate the book. I can't do below a 4 stars. Like, I don't know why. I just can't get myself to do it. And at that point, I usually do just not, which that maybe isn't helping. But that's when I pressed finish on my I am on Goodreads, which I should change to Fable. I think you said it's super easy, but I was looking at the reviews for Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I was like thought was really great, and there so quickly were reviews that were like, this is literally so like prissy, clearly just trying to be a show off and do something creative and whatever, and I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, people have all sorts of their own
When
opinions,
you do
especially when they
something,
see a woman trying.
yeah, when you do something impressive, show off. It's like, okay.
Literally. But I just am not. There are, of course, there are movies and things that I don't like, but I just don't think I have as critical of a look as some people. Because talking to some of my movie buff friends, they're like, ugh, you liked that? That was horrible. And I'm like, oh, I pretty much like to be entertained.
I think it depends what your expectation is. Is your expectation to go and be transformed by art? Then maybe sometimes that's not going to be what happens. Is your expectation I'm going to have an hour and 45 minutes in a dark theater, have my little popcorn vibe and see what happens? Then you'll probably be like, yeah, that was pretty good, or not my favorite, wouldn't go again.
What do you guys think of sneaking stuff into movies? That's what I want to know because I
I am pro.
I'm pro, and I don't think that that should be looked down upon because I understand like supporting the theater by buying their candy and stuff, and I can see that. But I'm like, okay, we'll start selling twin snakes.
That's the thing. Are you, if it's something that you don't offer, what I learned recently is that the reason you're not supposed to do that is because it's against health code, which I'm like, okay, fair enough. I don't want your business to get shut down. So if you have to be on the DL about it and you're like, this isn't allowed, but you're not actually going to be punitive about it, fine. But I, we come from a long line of we'll smuggle in full on meals to the movie theater. And is that kosher? Maybe not. And maybe you guys are like, okay, learning something about the twins that I don't appreciate. But I try not to
If you
do.
think that, don't act like you're above us morally because, oh, I'm sure there's something I could figure out about you that you've done that's kind of cheating the system.
Also, again, it's like, okay, well, until you offer a cheeky little ginger molasses cookie that I can have along with my popcorn, then what do you want me to say? I don't want raisinets.
Raisinets, that's crazy. But also I am majority of the time sneaking in something that is sealed and packaged, so shouldn't be a health code issue. That being said, is that always the case? No. Sometimes if I have something even better than something packaged, I will say that Sean and I did sneak in both two of the full tall boy liquid deaths to the to the last movie we went to, which is so funny because I feel like such a criminal about it. And I'm like, Sean was like, do you think we're good to put them in the cup holder? And I'm like, no. We need to like keep it in our lap. So we're like holding it like this to the side, like in the side of our seat because it's a full service theater where I'm like, there's a light shining. It's just so awkward that I'm like, there's light. You see everything right there.
What was so crazy that I did once was inari, the little tofu packets that are
Mm.
stuffed with
Oh,
sticky rice. And I brought those, and it was so good, and it hit so well for while you're watching the movie. And I'm like, listen, it's not sushi. It's not like it smells like fishy around me now. Maybe
no,
just
that would
like,
be gnarly. Just a fish
yeah.
tuna, a tuna fish sandwich. Like,
But it was in one of those like sushi containers. And I'm
yeah.
like,
Yum. That is now sounding so good to me. I can't even tell you. I'm literally strategizing how I can get someone nari. Um, I also did
but
see that a server accidentally spilled the drink fully on into someone's lap at the last movie, which is always
oh
such a
no.
bummer.
I obviously just see that so much from both sides where
Yeah.
it is of course a bummer for the customer and you do not want to like have that on your lap, who does? And that's like the worst thing that can happen to you at work where
Yeah.
you of course like don't want that to be the case so
Y-
much, and it's clearly such an accident. If you're going around doing that on purpose intentionally, then you are
That's crazy.
nefarious as hell, but that is not usually the case. And I just told Brayden the other day the story about when I was working at a coffee shop, like cafe, and one day I had just brewed a fresh hot pot of coffee and was going to go like fill these people from the carafe, and some crazy just thing happened where the carafe was ready to give away, and it's not like the top that holds it on fell off. The bottom fell away. I reached over to start pouring, and the bottom completely fell off. And so because like I'm holding it, it basically like was all on me, scalding hot coffee. But of course, like some got on their table and on their stuff, and the people about it were just like so frustrated and were like, oh my gosh, like I'm running, grabbing like a bunch of towels, cleaning it up, apologizing, clearly feeling bad about the situation. But the way that they reacted, and they were just like, oh my God, like my snow pants are wet. I'm like, okay, I took the brunt of that and it was boiling hot. And I am sorry that happened, but you saw what that was so clearly a freak accident that at first I was feeling very apologetic and bad about things, but then after a while with their reaction, their continued like not even anyone being like, "Oh, it's fine. Like, sorry. That's clearly an accident. We all know it's frustrating, whatever." Just like being like, "Ah, really, like we're fixing the problem for them, cleaning them, giving them like fresh plates if anything got like wet from the coffee and whatever, probably comping something on their meal, if not the probably not the whole meal, because again that's kind of crazy. It's like you still got to enjoy your meal, you just had one thing go wrong. But anyway, just with their reaction, I'm like, okay, all of a sudden I'm feeling now a little defensive where I'm like, that was an accident, this is more inconvenient for me than you, and I am sorry that your stuff got wet, but nothing's like ruined, and your snow pants are kind of the least of my concerns. The like item
Perfect
of
attire for
clothing,
a spill.
literally, I'm like, that's designed to be wet, so I'm sorry.
Yeah. It does obviously make you feel badly and is like, I wish I could say it's because I was being reckless, but that wasn't the situation. And if that was the situation, it's like, I'm a human. I'm so sorry. Please offer me a break like I would to you. I, as a barista, remember one time when I was first starting, I filled up someone's latte just literally right to the top. And it was a regular, and it was like, I think my first or second day in the barista position, and he had known me from being like doing the front register, and he was wearing business attire and spilled it down the front, like clearly was on his way to work, a nice suit, and spilled it down the front and kind of burnt his hands. I clearly, it's not like I served something inappropriately hot, which that is a concern because that's scary. I would be, for you in a coffee pot, I would be like, holy, I go treat in case you are having a third degree burn. Like that is legit scary. But thankfully for him, I was like, I'm not. Do I think maybe youch like that was hot? Yes, but thankfully I'm not worried that you're legitimately scalded. But just so embarrassing being like 16 and this regular and their super nice thing just spills it down. And he was like, yeah, maybe next time just like don't fill it up quite so full. And I'm like, yeah,
Wait, but you're saying like you set it on the counter and he grabbed it and had that happen?
yes, yeah.
Okay, that's where I'm also like, but you're an adult and you can tell how full it is, and yes,
Yeah,
maybe
but
next
that
time
counter is high, I will say.
Okay.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? You can picture the counter where I was working, that it is a high counter.
Yeah.
You aren't looking down on it. So,
It is high, and it goes both ways where it's like, maybe don't feel it as full. Okay, if it was like truly giving the effect of like the water is above the brim and like
it was a
just
science experiment.
surface, yeah, just
Tension.
surface tension is keeping it there. But I have been served drinks by a barista where you're like a centimeter from the top, and it's like, it's just crazy because I paid $10 for this 8 ounce drink, and so I just kind of wanted 8 full ounces. And
Yeah.
that's, I guess, petty in itself, but I'm like, I expect that a drink from a cafe is going to be to the brim. That is the appropriate level of full, in my estimation.
Yeah.
Something that we have to talk about is our generation. I would say we're Gen Z. We're obviously kind of zillennial. We're kind of on the edge. I don't always identify with like the more firm Gen Zers because even a couple years kind of does make that difference. But we're definitely in that pool.
We were
And I
born in
think this
1999 for the context, just so people
night,
know.
yep, right at the turn of the century. And I think this always happens. It seems like it's just habitual over time that the older generations have a lot to say about the younger generation. And frankly, we have a lot to say about the older generation. So everyone kind of
True.
has this tribalism going on. But there's just been a lot of, I don't even want to say hate, but sometimes hate, sometimes just criticism and being like, oh, these kids. So I think that we need to celebrate some of the things that our generation has given us because while we might have the generation of anxiety and crippling phone addictions, we're more than that.
Yeah. While the girls, gays, and theys might be using Nick sticks to the dome all day and night, we are also progressive allies. So weigh those two things.
Yeah, I think that if we were two different people in our same context, we would be celebrating like the jewel and the nightstick as one of the great things from our generation. Unfortunately, I cannot be on that train, but I don't
The
even know
jewel is
that
out of
our
style.
jewel is out of style. Shows you what I know.
Maybe not to everyone, but that's my friend yesterday. Two of my friends just told me that they quit and that they're 3 days clean from nicotine, which is awesome because if you have a Nick stick, it's it's happening all the time, you know? So that says something. That's been a long time for them. But I told her I'm like good because if you're wanting to look like a trendy gal, I just feel like it's on its way. Of course, people always are going to perceive smoking something to a degree as cool in a way, but I'm like I think it's seen its time. I don't think it's really viewed as cool anymore. I think people are more and more being like, no, that's not cool.
That's something that I actually think is cool about our generation is I feel like we're kind of the wave of sobriety. And of course, there's still substance use, and of course, there's still a lot of like glorification of that in a lot of ways. But I also feel like more than ever, it's maybe not more than ever. Obviously, I can only speak to like the context I know and understand, but it does seem very prevalent that a lot of younger people are choosing to be sober, or they don't drink much. Maybe they only like occasionally drink, or like occasionally smoke weed and do maybe some substances in certain situations, but I think that it used to be more so the scene among young people, as it would be like very uncool if you did not drink, or if you were in college and said you like, yeah, I actually live sober. I'm sure, again, there are still people that feel like that is kind of a negative thing, but people are talking about it more and more. I've even noticed influencers more and more posting about that and saying either like, I'm doing a year of sobriety, or I'm taking a month off of drinking, and talking about that, not necessarily because you have like an issue. Some people do, but some people, it's like, I don't even really like drink usually that much, or it's not out of hand. I just am making that as a lifestyle choice because, it's healthier for me, or it just feels right for whatever reason. And I think that's great.
I love that. And that to me piggybacks on the idea of, I think a lot of our generation is just more open to anything being perceived as cool. And that might sound hypocritical of what I just said of the jewel, but what I mean is that it seems like now people are more open to like, if you have your shtick, whatever it may be, like that's cool for you. Where I felt pressure growing up of like, oh, this is not seen as cool, this is not seen as cool, what is? And now I feel like for example, something back in the day was I was like, oh, not me having to wear my helmet strapped on at the skate park, like when everyone else is just wearing their hats, and I feel so stupid that I feel like now people these days are so anti like there being an idea of cool with that it's like, hey, you do your thing. Everyone knows if you're a good skateboarder that you don't care if someone's wearing a helmet as long as they're here and trying. Like being, I love that we are reframing the idea of trying in the sense of not being a try hard, but celebrating like if you're trying at something and you're being vulnerable and you're putting yourself out there, that is seen as cool. Or if you're just being who you are and not trying to fit in with what everyone else is doing, that is celebrated. And I love that vibe.
Another way that that comes up that just clicked for me, I feel like, is nail art and long extra manicures, where that definitely, also growing up in a small town, of course, we like had a different level of exposure, but that was kind of framed as like, that is odd and not like celebrated, and you should keep, like, if you're going to do acrylics or whatever, keep them very demure and short and plain sort of vibes. That now, I don't know if it, like, how long this legacy has been. I'm sure has like deeper roots in a history that I just was more unaware of in the context that I was living in, but people do such crazy, amazing nail art. I'm always like struck by the ideas that people have and the artistry of the manicurists. I forgot the name for a second. That's not what I was looking for, but the nail artists that come out with stuff. I saw a set the other day that somebody had on that was insane. Like, it looked like if you had like dipped your fingernails in like a bunch of dripping like gold jewels. Like, it was like had chains on them and such like sparkly pieces where it did not look like plastic gems glued on. I was just like, whoa, that looks crazy. And ones that look like actually like gummy bears and anything under the sun, if you can name it, it has been done. And that is something where I feel like that is so cool to just celebrate what you're into. And I don't feel like such this as much tension around it. Maybe it's because of the people I choose to surround myself by, but it's more normalized for me in the sense that it's like, oh yeah, go, you do you. That doesn't mean that's for everyone, and that's not the point. You're not doing it because it's like the beauty standard that everyone would want to fit into.
Yeah, and of course there are exceptions to the rule because there are always going to be outliers or everyone's an individual. So it's not what we have to say is not just the be all end all, but I do love that there's that yes, something that is prevalent and happening is the trend cycle. And that I don't love. That Riley and I have talked about the very quick revolving door of the trend cycle. But that being said, because the trend cycle was as quick as it was, and I think especially made that way on TikTok, like with that culture specifically, it went through clean girl and then went to the other side for mob wife aesthetic. And I think that now that people, this is more of kind of like a prediction and a gut feeling, but I think that now after having seen people be more so like, oh, the long nails are out um for clean girl, and now it's like, oh nope, long chunky nails are back in for mob wife, that now people are more like, you can be whatever without having to be so true blue to one category. And I think that people like being able to identify someone that has really true personal style, that's like, that can be fun and cool to celebrate someone who it's like they clearly just they really know who they are and how they like to present themselves. But I also think it's celebrated that people have eras. Like, for example, with Miley Cyrus, she has gone through so many public, forward facing eras of dressing differently, singing differently, acting differently, and that now I think people are really just appreciating from our generation the ability to evolve and not to have to keep yourself in a box.
With those trends, that I do not love the trend cycle and how it moves like that. But honestly, I do think that it's kind of fun the way that things get their little names. I was thinking about like cold girl makeup or like latte makeup and these different names for just looks. Some people probably think that that's like so cringy and annoying, and I think that there's definitely more investigation that deserves of like co-opting certain looks that have maybe come from like a particular group and then putting a kitschy name on it and acting like white girls came up with that makeup. Stuff like that deserves investigation. I'm not just being like, yes, I endorse this. I'm just saying I kind of think it's fun. I enjoy when people are doing their get ready with me and they're like, I'm kind of going for like a mob wife thing today because it's just kind of like a fun, like more universal language to utilize that takes away some of the almost like gatekeeping. I feel like that can happen in fashion and beauty and stuff, that you feel like something isn't for you, and making it more accessible for people that are like, oh, I can't really put a name on it because I'm not an expert, but this is like the look that I'm hoping to go for. It just kind of gives you that language with something that you're like, oh yes, I like that rosy cheek because it looks like you're flushed, like you're cold, or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Well, it's fun that that type of thing creates community of people getting to chat with each other and know that like they're understanding each other and sharing the same vibe. That type of thing is fun, and I think that community is a cool thing that has come out of our generation, even though sometimes I can be driven a little wild by the trends going on, more so talking about like TikTok trends or that there are trending sounds and trending audios that, especially if you don't know it, obviously that sometimes can just be like, wait, I'm confused. Why did this person say this thing? But I think it's pretty much harmless and fun that people are just feeling like they can relate to each other and joke with each other about that stuff. But the feeling of lack of seriousness, that it's like, we don't have to take this so seriously. It's okay. Like, we can let go. For example, with Instagram feeds, it felt more like this has to be so curated and put together and thoughtfully done. And now this is just one example of the way that Gen Zers have kind of made it like, no, it's okay to not be so serious in terms of perfection and looking perfect all the time and posting perfectly all the time and acting perfectly all the time. Like that, just permission to be who you are and be imperfect and celebrate that you're imperfect is refreshing.
I agree. And I think that social media is, I guess you could say, not necessarily coming out of this generation, since it was people like before us that actually like came up with it and like got started. And I'm not discrediting the like OGs out there that started that, but I do feel like Gen Z has been the one to really create like the internet culture as we know it, because we grew up with the screens and are very tech savvy and have just like kind of set the precedent for those things. And whether you like it or not and thinks like it's all positive or not, I certainly don't think it's all positive. However, I'm very grateful for the way that social media has created a more global community, because the way like globalization was happening prior to this sort of access we had to each other as civilians was, I feel like, very dictated by governments, and like the politics of globalization is something that I'm learning more about, but have a lot that I don't understand. But it kind of like allowed, and it's still happening, but our government to set the tone of like what we think of different places and different people. And now you can actually interact with a person that is from that part of the world, and it humanizes people a lot, even though it's through a screen. And I know that I have definitely had like my horizons broadened by getting to hear whatever it is daily, weekly, from someone that's actually just a person, a citizen living life in a very different situation than my own. And I remember when I started to even figure that out on the internet with one of my friends that was allowed on social media before we were, and she had all of these friends and was talking to someone. I forget exactly where they were, but it was in a different country, and I was like, wait, you're friends, but you've never met each other? And she's like, yeah, we're just like friends on the internet and we chat or like send each other things and whatever and have these conversations. And my brain just calculating, I'm like, you're friends though? And she's like, yeah, we're gonna go visit each other. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but you've never even met. And I was just learning and comprehending like, oh, we can have relationships with people that aren't our neighbors.
Yeah, I think that that has made so many people just have such a broadened horizon of acceptance. And I think Gen Z has done a great job of being allies and activism. And I, that, it hasn't always been done perfectly. And I don't know that there's a perfect way to do it, but I do love that there's the culture of being activists and caring about other people and caring to speak up for what you believe in. That is something I really appreciate. And then to rattle off a few of the sayings that I can appreciate from Gen Z, and there are some I used to be more hesitant, and I think I did used to be a little bit more of a hater, that I was like, I don't want to use that trendy language, but it has penetrated me, okay? I it's far gone at this point. The trendy language is part of my vocabulary. First of all, girls, gays, and theys. This was coined within the past 2 years. I love that. Gives the perfect community vibe when we are trying to say, this isn't for everyone. Cis straight men. This isn't for you. This is for the girls, gays, and theys. Love that. Blank is crazy. That one has stuck with me so well, and that just sums up a feeling so well. Like me saying Raisinets is crazy. No need to further expand on that. It's giving. I think that the previous way to say this was, this gives the vibe of, or this seems like, or this is reminiscent of, or, but now it's giving, just more to the point. Um, Living rent free. Because once again, that just sums up a feeling very well. Something living rent free in your head, that it's just like, can't get this off of my mind, living rent free. Okay, on to you, Rye.
I just want to acknowledge that I don't know the etymology of these phrases, but I have to believe that 90%, if not all of those, comes from black lingo, and that a lot of what has been popularized recently, kind of also through the gay community, has originally come from black folks, especially like black queer people, and that credit where credit is due, that they come out with fire phrases that encapsulate the moment so well. And I think that we
We all
love.
know pop culture wouldn't be what it is without black people. That's a fact. And also, shout out to Beyonce, shout out to Doechii. It's just so important to celebrate black people for all that they've accomplished, because our culture, American culture, would be so lackluster without what has been brought to the table by having rich cultures within.
Clearly, like, it's been such a crazy erasure that has happened, that there were indigenous folks here, and then simultaneously there were white and black people, because we all know the transatlantic slave trade, how that happened, which is such a dark history. But then there's this erasure that acts like black culture is something separate, or even so many people having their like lineage questioned. I saw a video the other day of a woman that was traveling abroad that's black, that's like, somebody from another country was like, yeah, but where in Africa are you from? Obviously that's not a unique experience, unfortunately. And she's like, I'm American as many generations back as our family can trace. And that it's like inextricable from the story of America. And it's so unfortunate that hundreds of years down the line, we're still like grappling with the fact that people want to act like it's something that it's not, and that they haven't always like set the precedent for culture and been ahead of the curve. When you look at our music industry, it's so exciting when these awards are given out, and I'm also like, it's frankly ridiculous and deplorable that this like few people are being acknowledged for their contributions when Black culture built what the music industry is today in America. Yet it's treated like, wow, like now we're starting to see these like really incredible Black artists. I'm not the best person to speak to this issue. I just think that something Quinn and I stand on in our belief system is having these conversations to try to like challenge your thinking and also open up the door and not always waiting for someone else to do that for you, even if you feel like you might be imperfect or not the most educated source on it, or you're nervous to say the wrong thing. Because I am someone that doesn't think that you need to like engage perfectly if you're showing up like curious, ready to learn, open to feedback, and with the right intentions of wanting to acknowledge like the truth of how things have been. And yeah, I just don't think that, I think that that stops people from having important conversations by feeling like, well, I don't know enough about this. I'm not saying if you're not an expert, you need to go out and be like, this is how it is, and let me tell you how things happened, because of course you don't want to spread misinformation. But in a setting like this where we're clearly just like trying to think things out with you, I think that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have these conversations. And if you're not having it out of fear of sounding wrong, you might end up on the side of the oppressor. And that is a duty that I feel very responsible to, is educating myself. I feel very responsible to educate myself about, this is clearly only one of the things, but right now talking about Black history. It's something that not only I feel the duty, but interest and curiosity. I care about knowing more of the truth of Black history. And I think part of being an ally and learning to be anti racist is putting yourself out there and trying to have the conversations and thinking critically when a thought enters your brain and thinking critically with what your words mean. But that doesn't mean being perfect. No one, I don't think Black people are not out here expecting white people to all of a sudden become perfect. Believe me, they know that that is not a worthwhile wish, because white people have been so far from perfect for so long. What is wanted is white people making the effort to learn and unlearn racism and to actually follow through on allyship, so it's not just performative, and to stand up and say what you're thinking and what you care about and to share on that stuff. And I think that it's a very worthwhile thing to, something I've been excited to tell the podcast is, I have many times in the past, quote unquote, attempted to diversify my feed. But the truth is, I didn't continue to try hard enough, where the feed, and I am talking more so in this case specifically about social media, I was just fed so much just whiteness. Almost always skinny white people. And that is something that still kills me on Pinterest. And I will say, I love Pinterest, but I have to specifically type Black cowgirl if I'm looking for not just white skinny cowgirls, when I'm looking for inspiration and that type of thing, or searching specifically Black artists. And that is something I'm not going to pretend that I have the right, the white formula, lol.
You do unfortunately have the
I
white formula.
White formula is all that I have, but I'm trying, and I have just decided I need to just put it out there. I used to feel like, oh, do I kind of have to dance around like really seeking out and typing the word Black specifically? No, I have to, for Black people to show up on my feed and for me to learn about more Black people and become more involved in seeing Black art and hearing opinions from Black people. I have had to very diligently curate my feed for that and look and search and follow those people and go down rabbit holes. And I'm so happy to say that I am finally really feeling that start to pay off. As crazy and silly as it sounds, now I'm finally, when I'm scrolling on Reels, I'm actually being fed content from black people. And I'm like, finally, because it sucks, you guys, but it's the truth is that these voices are shut down and they aren't being uplifted in so many ways. Like we are still they are still oppressed and we have to put it in our ears listening to these people reading black people's work, reading. And I have loved that I'm like actively looking for, and you shouldn't be ashamed. There's nothing to be ashamed about to search for black authors. They
Yeah.
are not always the first thing you see when you're like hear about a New York Times bestseller, even though there are amazing black authors out there. I am being very diligent about searching for that to tune in my ears, to tune in on my books and on my feed. And I just encourage you guys to continue to make that push.
It's very true and so worthwhile to pursue because it just is such a transformative thing to see other like expressions of perspectives in the world than a super like narrow box of people like you that is just not going to be nearly as rich and interesting and diverse as the world has to offer us. It's like if you only eat the same meal for dinner for the rest of your life. I'm so uninterested in a life like that. And I'm proud of you for pursuing that so diligently, Quinn. There's one piece of Q&R code housekeeping we want to update you guys on. So there will not be a bonus episode coming out the second Friday of the month anymore. That came from Quinn and my desire to really want to offer the most value that we could and wanted to think of an idea of how can we get people even like more to enjoy about the Q&R code. And then we decided and learned from the people that listen that video was really like a strong desire and that maybe if we just did video episodes that is providing something that people are asking for and interested in. And so right now that's what we're going to do to scale back and have it be like still sustainable that we can be giving you the best thing, the best product that we can come out with. Thanks for choosing to spend your time with us.
Happy Valentine's Day! We hope that you have such a fun little loving day with your loved ones and sending you guys all of the best, most heartfelt, romantic, close, loving vibes.
And we are going to be thinking of you all and until next week. So please go to our Instagram at the Q&R code or our YouTube also at the Q&R code if you need some company until then. See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye!